I'm a professional dog trainer, and if I was going to raise a puppy to avoid aggression and reactivity in the future, these are the things I would do. Let's get into it. What's up guys, it's Jenna with Dog Liaison, where I coach you on how to enhance your dog's mental health. On this channel we break down scientific research in order to inform us on how to train dogs. So if you're interested in training dogs in a nerdier way, consider subscribing. Here are 6 things I would do if I was raising a puppy to avoid aggression and reactivity in the future. Now, of course, aggression has a genetic component. And even if you did all 6 of these things, your puppy could still end up demonstrating aggression in the future through no fault of your own. But I think it's important you still implement these 6 things, not because it's a lost cause and because your puppy will have aggression regardless, but because the point is to stack the deck in your favor. Despite genes, dogs can learn. Dogs can make healthy choices despite what their DNA coding suggests. And it's important that we are doing these 6 things to stack the deck in our favor to ensure that, to the best of our capability, our dog does not demonstrate aggression towards us in the future. Number 1, if I was raising a puppy between the ages of 8 weeks and about 16 weeks, I would make sure I learned everything about that puppy's breed, and specifically what their breed's natures are. So if you have a mix, for example, you're still going to want to get a DNA sample on that dog to make sure that you know what breeds lie within him, and you are understanding how that breed operates. There are indeed certain breeds that were designed as guardians, and therefore they're more inclined to protect things. Or you might have certain breeds that are more inclined to grab, bite, and shake, right? And so those dogs are going to be more inclined to use their teeth to accomplish things. And it's not that these dogs are inherently more aggressive and that they're more likely to be dangerous. It's that you want to know what breed components are artificially selected within your dog that may influence whether or not he demonstrates what we would deem dangerous or aggressive behavior. While also doing the research on your dog's breed to find out what their natural inclination is for aggression or protective instincts, you also want to find out if they are more sociable with certain individuals. Perhaps they're more sociable with dogs, or they're more standoffish with other dogs. Perhaps they're more sociable with small animals, or perhaps they're more predatory against small animals. Similarly to humans, perhaps your dog's, from a breed component, more inclined to be around humans, or perhaps they're not. If you have a more what we would call natural dog or a nature dog, they might appear more standoffish and less inclined to be around people and crowds. And it's important that we're taking into account what our dog's DNA is telling him to be. And it's not that we're trying to combat that or go against it necessarily, but it knows where we need to spend most of our attention. And this leads me into the second step, the second piece of advice that I have for you, which is quality socialization based on what we think your dog's DNA is suggesting. So for example, if your dog is hardwired to be more friendly with a bunch of people, and you see naturally in those early ages, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, that he enjoys being around people, well, perhaps you're not necessarily spending all of your time getting people to interact with him. Perhaps you might spend a little bit more time focusing on getting him to interact with other dogs, to build those relationships, to get him more familiar with textures and the world. And when we talk about socialization, guys, we're not just saying people and dogs. We're actually talking about how that puppy interacts in everything in the world, including textures. Of course, I have a Science Explained on socialization, and you can check that video out next if you're interested. So I won't deep dive too much into how socialization operates. But the point of this particular step is to focus on quality socialization. I really steer guardians away from thinking in terms of quantity of like, I have to get 15 people to touch my puppy today, or I have to get 100 people to touch my puppy in the next 100 days, or I have to get, you know, my dog playing with 18 new dogs every single week. Don't necessarily think about the quantity of the interactions. Focus on the quality of those interactions. What is your dog learning? What is your dog taking away? And if you're noticing that your dog is more shy or sensitive or is more quick to dislike a certain interaction, don't necessarily mean that that means your dog is going to lean towards towards aggression or that it's going to escalate necessarily any minute now. Instead, focus on, okay, my dog's perception of this is that it has a negative association. It's bad, it's scary, it's not fun, whatever it is. How can I find a way to make this interaction positive? How can I change his association with this stimulus or individual? Now, if you have a puppy and you're focusing primarily on avoiding reactivity, avoiding aggression, avoiding some of these behavioral issues, that does not mean give your dog more obedience. My friends, even when we are working with dogs that are facing behavioral issues, aggression, reactivity, we are hardly ever focusing on obedience in those situations. And in fact, obedience at that point is a nice to have, not a need to have. And so in these early stages of raising your puppy, in these early stages of really shaping and molding their personalities and their likes and dislikes, I don't want you to focus on teaching your dog sit, down, stay, come. And the reason is because those basic skills can be taught at any point in your dog's life. Those skills can be acquired at any time. Whereas in these first 16 weeks or so, sometimes less, of your dog's life, he is forming so much of his identity in these early stages. He is forming so much of what he likes and doesn't like and what he's interested in and what he wants to partake in, how he thinks and how he creates associations. He is learning so much in this stage that you really want to exacerbate its benefits. You really want to give him as much opportunity to build associations, to think critically, and that does not require obedience. Putting your dog in a sit doesn't take much thought from your dog, especially because most dogs offer it as an organic behavior. The reason you might put your dog in a puppy class, a more like basic skills puppy 101 class, is because of the socialization component, not because of the cool down stay that you're going to learn. That is so minimal when it comes to what you really should be focusing on. And the other thing is that if you do want to teach your dog sit, down, stay, come in these early stages, then you actually want to be prioritizing how you're teaching it. In the same way that when kids go to school, they're learning to write a thesis not because they need to know all of the ins and outs of what makes a sentence, but because they need to be able to make an argument. Right? When you take your kid to school to learn math, it's not because they need to figure out what 2 times 2 is. Instead, they're learning problem solving skills, right? So focus less on the actual material and like what your dog is actually doing and focus more on the journey to get to that point, because it is the life skill that those obedience behaviors are going to instill in your dog that is more important than literally did he put his butt to the ground. That is so minimal in comparison, especially because, as I said, that's something that you can teach your dog to do. You can teach a dog to put his butt on the floor at any age, at any point, assuming it's a healthy dog. The one skill I absolutely do think you should teach your dog is a process called counter conditioning and desensitization. Now, counter conditioning and desensitization are typically used for reactivity and aggression cases. That's usually where that skill comes into play, is once the dog is already demonstrating it. But I actually promote that you teach this life skill to your puppy before they actually need it. This is about being proactive instead of reactive to the problem, right? If you can teach your dog a skill before they actually need it, then if they do end up needing it, you already have that skill instilled and you just jump into the implementation stage, right? You don't actually have to teach anything. So counter conditioning and desensitization is a process in which we take an association that a dog already has, switch it to a different association, and then also attach a new behavior. So here's how this might look realistically. If your puppy has a negative association with the crate, you would first create positive associations with the crate by giving the dog things that he likes in the crate. He likes his Kong full of peanut butter, he likes his toy, he likes his whatever. You first create that really positive association in the crate. Then once that association is established, then you focus on, okay, what behavior do we do in the crate? So now that we have our puppy enjoying the thing, what behavior should they do when they're around the thing? Well, in the case of the crate, they might lay and go to sleep. They may rest on their pillow and sniff things in the air. It's a more calm behavior. Similarly with people, right? If we think about doing counter conditioning with a person, our first tactic is give that puppy a really positive association with this person. How can we make sure that the puppy really likes this person? Then once we see that that positive association is occurring, what behavior should we have our puppy do around this person? What you do not want to do is jump to the behavior stage when the puppy has the incorrect association formed. So for example, if you're trying to jump into interacting with people, and your puppy is demonstrating sensitivity, caution, fear, anger, is demonstrating a negative association, which is not the association you want, if that's the case, then you would not jump to the behavior component of it. You would not put your dog in a sit. You would not worry about having your dog actually meet the person. Why? Because your dog is working off the wrong association. You're building a block on top of something that is not the right association. So instead, we need to get that foundation where we want it, which is a positive thing. We get that association built and we work off of that. Alternatively, you might actually just want to desensitize a stimulus. So perhaps your puppy has a positive association with the person. Your puppy has a really positive association with the whatever, but it's too exciting, it's too positive. Your puppy is losing her mind over how much she likes this thing. And you just want to simmer that positivity a little bit. You want to desensitize it. The way that we would do this is by giving your puppy a little bit of exposure to the stimulus at a mild rate. This is the process of desensitization. Again, another life skill that you and your puppy should absolutely master. Desensitization, you can think of this in terms of exposure therapy. The only thing is that it's only effective, it only really works well the way you want it to if it starts off at a mild rate. So here's the wrong way to do desensitization. We're going to put our puppy against a person, have them be bouncing off the wall, put them in a sit, and have them just be like a volcano waiting to erupt, waiting for them to burst, right? That is not the way we do desensitization because they're already bouncing off the walls. They're already living at that 10. Or perhaps if we think of this in terms of a human interaction, if you are afraid of spiders, desensitization does not work by me just putting a spider on top of your head and say get used to it. That would be inappropriate. Why? Because your association with that spider is so averse, your association with that spider is so extreme that you're not in a healthy state to be desensitized. But if we took that spider and put it way away from you, 20 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet, 300 feet away from you, where you were confident that that spider couldn't get you in immediate danger, then we could mildly expose you to that spider and increase the difficulty over time. It's the same principle for your dog. If you want to desensitize something, don't put your puppy in the middle of the pandemonium. Don't put your puppy in the middle of that excitement, whether it's good or bad. Don't put your puppy in that state where the emotion is so overwhelming. Instead, separate the two far enough, decrease that difficulty enough so that you're operating at just a slight exposure, just slightly around the stimulus. And then you can build the duration, build the distance, build the interaction over time and gradually. And this leads me into another life skill that I absolutely recommend you teach your puppy, which is something we call impulse control. Now, impulse control is when an individual really wants something, but they're willing to hold off and not take that something in the expectation that if they wait, they get something better instead. And that really is the key component. Impulse control relies on the individual getting something better if they choose to wait, as opposed to responding to their impulse, right? What I see a lot of times with puppies is people will have their puppy in a sit, but then the payoff is comparable to what they would have gotten if they had just bolted across the stay and gotten whatever they wanted. So for example, with a wait, if you put your puppy in a sit stay and then put a treat on the floor and then they get it and then they run up and get the treat, that is not teaching impulse control. Why? Because the payoff is comparable to what they would have gotten if they had just raced for the treat in the first place. The only benefit to waiting was that they didn't have to listen to your scolding, but that wasn't much of a benefit, really, not in comparison. Really, the benefit is one is less scary than the other. That's not the kind of relationship we want to have with our dog. Instead, we want to show them that, okay, I see that you really want this thing, and I get that, but if you ignore that thing, I'll give you something more valuable, something you love more if you wait. That is treating impulse control. Impulse control has a way of increasing adrenaline, increasing the arousal, increasing the excitement, and asking them to harness that excitement. Again, this goes back to what we were talking about with life skills. It's not about can you put your dog in a sit stay? It's not about can you put your dog in a down? It's not about can you give your dog a bunch of treats when he's at the park? That's not what it's about. Instead, you're instilling critical thinking. You're instilling life skills into your puppy. And so what this might look like is you are giving your dog puzzles, food puzzles, or even just not even food puzzles, but toy hunts where they have to look for something and think critically. Maybe they have to swat over boxes to get to stuff. They have to push things with their noses. They have to really hunt and put their nose on the floor and sniff. You're giving them opportunity to think about what they're doing despite the fact that they're in a state of excitement. And hopefully it's a positive excitement, right? Despite the fact that they've got adrenaline pumping through them, despite the fact that they are stimulated and aroused and like, oh my God, something's happening, they're still thinking logically. They're still operating in their prefrontal cortex up here in the front. They're not responding too much with those like ancient parts of the brain, which are more compulsive or emotional sometimes, right? We really want them thinking in the front. And this is a nice segue to the next thing that I would do if I was raising a puppy to avoid reactivity and aggression, is that I would give my puppy the right enrichment, not just any old enrichment, not just like take my dog out for a fetch because that's what the book told me to do, not just take my dog for a walk because that's what the book told me to do, but I would be looking at what my dog tells me, what my puppy tells me she needs. I would be looking at what her breed tells me she needs. Does her breed need more hunting, more sniffing opportunity? Does her breed need more listening and observing and studying and more pause? Something that can be really detrimental to a puppy's enrichment is if you're always thinking that you have to go, 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 that enrichment is only about exercise, enrichment is only about cardio, enrichment is always about, you know, getting that heart rate pumping. That's not true, guys. Enrichment is so much more than just like how much cardio can you give a dog. Instead, it's also about how are they existing in alignment with what their needs are. That is enrichment. How are they having the opportunity to exist as deemed by what their internal experience, their neurons, their DNA, their internal experience says they require. That is enrichment. So you might be thinking about how they eat, how they sleep, how they drink, how they use the bathroom, how they interact, what their social skills are. Those are all components of enrichment. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up. It'd be super helpful. Consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you get notified when I drop a new video. Make sure to check out these next two videos, and I'll see you guys next week.